The end of My Hero Academia is almost here, but we still don't know exactly what the future will look like for Deku. So here's every possible timeline for future Deku. First up, we have Old Man Deku. This is pretty much a guarantee at this point. Since the very first page of the very first chapter, Deku has been our narrator from the future, recounting the events of his life. It's repeated on a few occasions that this is the story of how he became the greatest hero. Something that All Might internally acknowledged Deku to be since he ran to save Bakugo from the sludge villain. And now, as someone who inspires others to get up and do their best, he is the greatest hero to the entire world. But old folks have a tendency to ramble, so instead of ending the story there, Old Man Deku has more to say about what happens after the final war. Back when the battle against the villains took a turn for the worst, we actually caught a glimpse of Old Man Deku's future. 3 cherry blossom trees were blowing in the wind. The national flower of Japan being in bloom signifies a new spring, new beginnings. Contextually, this was a subtle indication that the country endures despite the gust of new winds and the changing of seasons. We'd also see an elderly hand grasp at the flowing petals. Knowing that our narrator for the entire series has been Deku makes this connection a pretty easy one to accept. At the very least, we can confirm that Deku will live a long life regardless of the details. And he's probably still in Japan. This is the point that all possible timelines we'll talk about will inevitably lead to. Next up, we have Armored Deku. This is a timeline where Deku pretty much becomes the Batman/Iron Man of his world and continues being a hero with the help of support items. Technology in the world of My Hero Academia is very advanced. If it wasn't for the sudden appearance of quirks destabilizing society, humanity would already be traveling to different solar systems. Tartarus was a maximum security prison for the most dangerous criminals in Japan. Instead of having especially powerful guards, its state-of-the-art vitality and quirk activation sensors and robots made it practically inescapable. UA uses robots of varying shapes and sizes to gauge the battle capabilities of its hero hopefuls. The artificial intelligence of said robots has been proven to be quite robust, and is comparable to that of Skynet from the Terminator series. This is explicitly said, and they even felt a sense of fear when they went up against Mina's Acid Man move. All of this is to say that the sole use of technology as a means of fighting crime has been possible since the very beginning. The real hurdle was societal acceptance. But when it comes to Opera's new tab emoji feature, there are no hurdles at all. If you have more tabs open than All for One has quirks, then Opera is just the hero you need. By labeling them with silly icons, you can change the whole mood of your browser in seconds. Aside from being fun, emojis can add a level of personality that words just can't match. When I'm gathering my notes on different characters, I can use emojis to make my tabs easier to recognize at a glance. For Deku, I have broccoli, Mineta has grapes, and Sue obviously deserves a frog. But I'm still debating which one to use for Deku's dad. I usually have a sea of text at the top of my browser, but tab islands make things more organized than Deku's All Might collection. You can group tabs based on context to save space and quickly cycle through them. So stop collecting the same boring pile of tabs and go beyond with Opera's new tab emojis. You can find a link to it at the top of the description. Because superpowers are the norm and not the exception, heroes are strictly held to the rules enforced by the government. Ultimately, they have superpowers, so there was no precedent or even a need for a hero that operates with only support items. And the means necessary for such a thing were not accessible to a regular person like Deku. But now, thanks to All Might's example during his final fight against All for One, we actually have proof of just how effective this approach can be. All Might was a frail and quirkless old man who would bleed from just a sneeze. But with the help of Melissa Shields' technology, he was able to hold his own against the most powerful villain in history. The highlight of the power suit was its many features that mimic the various quirks of Class 1A students. In isolation, none of the suit's capabilities were inherently superior to the quirks they were based on, but when combined, the results were incredible. Mind you, Melissa's shield had a very short amount of time to create this thing and get it to All Might. He sent her the specifications he desired, which included a function based on Black Whip. The earliest that could have been included would have been early December. But that's unlikely to be the origin point for a few reasons. Back then, All Might spent every waking hour researching the lost history of One For All's previous users. He looked more like a skeleton than usual and even forgot it was Christmas. Deku couldn't even draw out Black Whip on his own, and even when he did, he could only manage a few centimeters. Also, the heroes weren't preparing for war just yet. The more likely start time would have been about a week into January. Thanks to his training with Endeavor, Deku had finally figured out Black Whip. Once winter break was over, All Might got to see the quirk be properly used for the first time. By April, the border was shut down due to the post-war turmoil. So, assuming the Black Whip aspect wasn't just a late addition, All Might's suit was made in only about 4 months. And even if we assume this was an ongoing project with Black Whip being the finishing touch, the earliest this could have started would have been sometime in late August, after All Might loses power during the Kamino incident and recovers a bit. That's still a very short time frame. Not to mention the fact that this suit came with the mid-gauntlet for Deku and All Might's car Hercules, which was designed to be compatible with the suit. If all of this could be made in just a few months, imagine what could be made for Deku with more time. Melissa Shield watched the broadcast of All Might's entire fight. That level of field testing would only make her next attempt even better. Thanks to using the many quirks of One For All, Deku is a master of simultaneous processing and making the most out of the tools he has available. Deku knows and admires quirks more than anyone else. Although their powers were supercharged by One For All, many of the previous users were astonished by the ingenious ways Deku was able to creatively use their quirks. A suit like this would be perfect for him. He's also in much better physical shape than All Might and is still growing. And because it's Deku, maybe Mei Hatsume could work with Melissa to make one for him. Her designs have been pretty major for many of Deku's costumes now. Honestly, the biggest issue with this possible future is pretty simple: money. All Might has always been a rather frugal guy. But unsurprisingly, being the symbol of peace for close to 40 years and the most marketable hero in history actually pays pretty well. But it turns out that All Might spent his entire fortune on his new car and suit, so we can hardly expect power suits to be mass-produced anytime soon. Although, seeing as Deku is the world's greatest hero, I don't think that many governments of the world making a donation would be too unreasonable. I'd also argue that including Momo in the production process would help cut down on expenses. Overall, I really like this concept, and I think it's pretty fitting. Moving on, we have quirkless Deku. This is the outcome that the least amount of fans want to see, but it's one that Deku himself doesn't really mind. He may have been born quirkless, but like he said at the beginning of the series, this was his first and last setback. Deku was able to live his dream of becoming a hero and will always be remembered for the incredible things he was able to accomplish during that time. Even if he can't charge headfirst into battle anymore, there is no way his contributions to heroism would stop there. He promised characters like Lady Nagan and Shigaraki that he would thoroughly change things. The fulfillment of these vows has to go beyond a lot of punching. Even Shigaraki told him that everything will depend on what Deku and the other heroes do from now on. And looking at All Might's example yet again, even without a quirk, he was able to continue serving as a teacher at UA. Deku's future could be as a teacher, or even as a principal if Nezu ever steps down. He could be there to guide preceding generations of heroes, like Eri, Kota, or any of the Masagaki school kids. At that point, the title of the story would be extremely fitting, since it would literally be Deku's Hero Academy. But ahead of that possibility, we still have Ember's Deku. If nothing changes, this will be the new normal for Deku before he completely loses his power. After transferring One For All to Shigaraki, Deku, like All Might before him, held onto the fading remnants of the quirk. This fleeting power was strong enough to stop All For One with only 2 punches. Because One For All was able to become so much stronger in Deku's possession, his Ember's mode is also stronger than All Might's. In the midst of the final war, the largest cloud in recorded history began to form over Japan. This was thanks to a tropical typhoon being supercharged by the insane heat produced by Dabi, Shoto, and Endeavor. With the strength of his embers backing his fist, Deku cleared the skies for both Japan and the United States. Thanks to his conversation with All Might and Bakugo in the hospital afterwards, we know that Deku's embers aren't gone yet. With his embers, All Might was able to continue doing hero work, fight the Nomu, and even defeat All For One at Kamino. Though Deku likely has a few more good fights left in him. Deku with embers is still unbelievably strong, and many levels beyond his fellow heroes. And even when All Might was running on fumes, he was suffering from lingering injuries. Deku might have a new hairstyle, but all things considered, he's in pretty good shape. With the general shift in direction for the story, Horikoshi could have easily decided to make Deku quirkless by the end of the war. Though narratively, he must have the embers for a good reason. Which brings us to a brighter prospect: Rekindle Deku. What if Deku uses these embers to ignite a new flame? Going all the way back to the very early days of the series, Deku told Bakugo that although he got his quirk from someone else, he was going to make it his own someday. This came up again during the provisional license exam, and again when he fought Bakugo at night. Then it came up during the joint training battle. Making one for all his own has been a long-standing pursuit of Deku's, one that despite all that he's accomplished, hasn't properly or definitively been concluded. Many fans believe that the UA Trader element was forgotten since it hadn't come up since the Forest arc, but Horikoshi definitely cleared that up. Making the power his own became a plot point earlier in the series than that, and has come up more frequently. Being born quirkless let All Might and Deku harness the incredible power of One For All without being killed by the strain. According to the first user, Yoichi, the power was a perfect fit for All Might's once empty vessel. This allowed it to truly become his quirk. Unlike the users before him whose vestiges were linked to their quirk factors, All Might imbued One For All with a true piece of his consciousness. This is why his vestige looked the way it did, and he was able to sense things happening to and within One For All without wielding the quirk himself. Meanwhile, Deku's connection to One For All is even stronger, not just in terms of it finally manifesting its true power and growing beyond its prior limitations. At first, Deku was a mostly shrouded presence that couldn't speak or move, but eventually, he became able to completely manifest within the quirk and hold full-blown conversations with the previous users. Then he could see and speak to them all simultaneously while being in the midst of battle. He even leveraged this to the extent of venturing into Shigaraki's subconscious and changing things there. And now that all of the vestiges are gone, Deku is the sole possessor of the power. Who else could say it's theirs but him? Even after he gave them up to destroy Shigaraki's defenses, Deku still managed to hold onto tiny wisps of his predecessors for the sake of properly putting an end to All For One. That just goes to show how incredible his connection to the power had become. Deku may have given the power away, but it's not like this was the first time. While fighting against 9, Deku transferred One For All to Bakugo. In doing so, they both became far more powerful, and Deku was still the one to keep it. And if it wasn't already abundantly clear, that entire movie is canon, just like all the others. When it comes to One For All, Deku is the ultimate anomaly. Even when things are explicitly stated to be one way, he inevitably reveals an alternative. So why should his embers be any different? Salvaging the extra quirks probably won't happen, but the base power may very well persist and remain with him for the rest of his life. It'll be different, but no less incredible. The power will truly become his. But Deku has a lot more than just a quirk to make his own. It's time for us to talk about Father Deku. I apologize to all the shippers in advance, but let's be real here. Deku and Uraraka getting together romantically is pretty much inevitable. I could sit here and list out all the moments that point towards that being the case, but this would be a different video at that point. If nothing else, Uraraka's direct confession that she's in love with Deku during her fight against Toga should quell any doubts. Horikoshi may be deviating a bit from the traditional end of a shonen formula, but I doubt he'll shy away from the tradition of giving the main character a kid. And hopefully Deku won't be like his dad and will actually be present in his child's life. Although Deku was born quirkless, this is very unlikely to be the case for any kids he might have. On top of their mother having a quirk, quirklessness continues to decline with each generation. With that in mind, a user of One For All has never had a child while wielding the power. Although Shimura Nana is the only known parent, her son Kotaro was born before she became a wielder. And although anomalies like Eri can sometimes occur, most people receive a combination of their parents' quirks to some degree. If Deku has truly managed to make the quirk his own, then there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't be able to persist genetically to some extent as well. One for All is an inherently transferable power. Furthermore, it actually depends on DNA to do so, and that process doesn't get much more robust than producing a genetic offspring. Truly, the supercharged aspect of One for All being combined with Uraraka's now city-level gravity manipulation would be unreal. And thankfully, this level of power would not come at the expense of the child's life because it would be their natural quirk. Now, imagine if Deku and Uraraka named their kids Toga or Tenko. That might not be the best idea, but I honestly think that would be hilarious. Plenty of things can happen to Deku from here on out, but these are the most likely possibilities. Let us know your favorite. And if you have some ideas of your own, drop them in the comments so we can see how they'll compare with what Horikoshi ends up doing. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.